Hello, and welcome to the Todd and Taylor Show. I am Todd A.
Taylor Trask.
And how are you doing?
I'm good. It's summer's almost over. School's almost here. Fall's in the air. At least here in Denver, it's in the air. It's been remarkably cool the last week or so. It's kind of like, oh, don't change. Don't. I always compare seasons changing to kids visit. Basically kids changing out dorm rooms at college. Right. So there's always that day, summer's still hanging out in the room, but there's that day that fall comes in to check out the room and, show her parents the school and everything. She's like, I'll be back in 2 weeks. And if this looks great, I can't wait to move in. And summer's like, that's great. Yeah, you can move in. I'll be out of here soon. And, I'll leave a couple things around, but they'll be all yours in 2 weeks. And there's a nice even handover, when I lived in Nashville, that handover was not good. If you recall, I mean, you still are there from time to time anyway, because your parents live there. But if you recall, summer, it's not like, like the hip kid in college. Summer's like this old, fat, homeless, drunken, whatever you want to call it, who won't leave the room when asked to. And it actually takes the campus police coming in, physically removing them from the room. And then fall has to spend a month for breezing the goddamn place just to get comfortable to move in. And by the time she's moved in, winter's already like, hey, I'll be coming in 2 weeks. And fall's like, but I just got it to how I like it. Okay, I guess. So it's nice to be in a place. All that big rambling analogy or metaphor aside, it's nice
I didn't know where you were initially going with this a detailed anthropomorphized version of the seasons, but everything I like where it ended up.
I give everything in my metaphor library a name and a face and a physicality. So even my cats are people,
But that is totally correct. Nashville has this there's always like a week or so in Nashville where you're like, this isn't so bad, and then I think of it as like from school days when I went to prep school and I would have to put on my khakis and my loafers or something and go to school, and not that I was necessarily in a long sleeve shirt, but I was in uncomfortable clothes. Mm-hmm. And it would, and it's like September, October, and it would be steamy and gross and like 85, but like a wet 85. It was so disgusting. And, I'm like all miserable in these uncomfortable clothes. That's what I always associate with Nashville, the early post-summer.
When you walk into a Walmart or JCPenney's in those conditions, and it's like, there's no shorts or T-shirts. It's like, here's a wool sweater, and here's like a hoodie, like all these things. You're like, I don't need any of this right now. Do you have a T-shirt? Oh no, we don't sell those. It's not until summer again.
Yeah, that's so funny. That was what always threw me off in Nashville. Like, why are you selling winter clothes? It's still 88 degrees outside. But it's like, nope, that's just when Old Navy ships them out. So. It's when we stock them here at Old Navy.
Well, they don't care one way or the other. But this is not about Nashville summers. This is about technology. We're going to do an episode where you and I guess we had a lot of news and maybe some grievances and things that we wanted to get out there. And
airing of grievances.
It's Techtivus here on the Todd and Taylor Show, and we will be doing the airing of grievances. Copyright Todd and Taylor. Oh my God.
This is also one of the other motivations for this episode is classic Todd A motivation, which is I really want to write something to express my thoughts. I can't find the time to write it. Then I do find the time, decide I'm too lazy to write it. And I say to Taylor, why don't we just do a podcast on it? Because then I can literally make 3 bullet points and we can just talk for an hour.
Yeah. Nope.
Which is way easier than the multi-article airing of grievances that I was planning.
Yeah. Well, let's just jump on in. What's on your shit list this week?
I'll say this was my concept, which I may still flesh out. It was I was going to write an article called "Apple Sucks," and it's all Apple's fault, and then I would follow that up with another article about why Android sucks.
Okay.
Although it might not be Android's fault. So I'll just start with why Apple.
Well, wait. Before you jump in, because I can already hear all the little Apple fanboys out there going, well, you're a Windows guy. Like you own a MacBook.
We'll get into it.
But you own Apple products. Like it's not like you have been, you're not like some, Bill Gates, devotee who's always naysayed Apple.
I am am the anti Windows person.
Yeah.
I don't.
So
Yeah.
you're a true believer who has lost his faith.
Oh, I was never a true believer in Apple, but I am, as in all things, an agnostic, and I wish that the platforms out there allowed for people of my lack of faith.
I see. All right.
Well, but the Apple story is great for us to discuss because here's what happened. We record these podcasts and edit them on several different products, actually, but largely Apple products is what I at least edit on. And often I have relied on a tool that Apple created called GarageBand, which, recording purists will tell you is kind of a joke.
All the kids are using GarageBand these days.
But the thing is, GarageBand is dead easy to use, and that's what matters in a product, not not the complex DAW, the digital audio workstation, of a lot of these other things. GarageBand just it's plain and simple. And it's easy to work, and until a good competitor comes up against that, that's kind of what I use because it's easy.
It's weird that nothing on Windows except for Audacity, which isn't really. I mean, Audacity still sort of is.
I like Audacity. I default to Audacity if I can't use GarageBand.
I mean, I like it too, but Audacity has kind of flown under the radar. It seems like they've never really professionalized the product or the UI.
It's open source.
Yeah, and you still have to download like the lame MP3 and encoder to export an MP3 from a separate thing. I still like it nonetheless, but it's just weird to me that with all these years of GarageBand, no one on the Windows platform with maybe SQL, maybe.
Well, I hear really, really great things about, I believe it's called Reaper, which is not exactly open source, but they have a licensing system, as far as I understand, based on sort of the honor system of like if you're an artist that doesn't make any money in royalties, well, it's free to use. Mm-hmm. And but once you can kind of afford it, they say, please buy the commercial license. So I just looked it up. It's $60 for the discounted license, $225 for the commercial. And you can use the discounted license if you're an individual, blah, blah, blah. But Reaper is kind of extensible in the way that Audacity is. Like there's a bunch of plugins and stuff. And there are for GarageBand too. I've checked it out. It was just not as easy for me to jump into as GarageBand, because the other thing is like, and even though I've recorded a lot of music in GarageBand, when you and I are doing podcasts, it is dead simple. We're talking 1 to 4 tracks. Mm-hmm. There's EQing, there's some slight effects, and sometimes there's a soundtrack, and that's about it. But we're not talking like multi-instrumental, songs where all these things have to have different levels and effects and stuff like that. So the simpler, the better. So Audacity or GarageBand is where I'm at. So let me catch you up. So then I decide, well, I was hitting a couple of walls on hardware, and my MacBook is 5+ years old, and it's heavy in that way that like a 5-year-old laptop is, and it's a little slow. It's even though it's pretty spec'd out, but it's slow. And I thought, hey, maybe I just get an iPad, and I know they come with GarageBand now. They've gotten, iOS GarageBand. I can edit. Plus, I was taking a trip this a few weeks ago, and I thought I'll get it right before my trip. I'll get on the plane. I'll plug the headphones in. I'll be able to edit our podcast from that week. I can go into our old podcasts and chop them up. It's all going to be at my fingertips. It's going to be beautiful. I shop. I have a very opinionated Apple fanboy friend who is extremely knowledgeable about all of this stuff. He had just bought an iPad Pro. He goes over all the ins and outs of it with me. I talked to a rep at the Apple store for like 30 minutes or more. I'm like totally taking up this guy's time to make sure I'm getting the right iPad. Everybody, of course, that I've talked to at an Apple store knows why I'm getting it. Editing audio. I want a portable audio workstation. That's what I want. So when I decided to buy it, I didn't go back to the same Apple store. So I talked to another guy.
Boo.
I tell that I know. They were far away.
Like, thanks, but I'm gonna go over here.
So I tell that guy to say, but my point being, I've now told like 2 or 3 Apple store employees, it's all for podcasting, you know? So I get the, first of all, they let me walk out with the guy gets me the wrong memory. I have to like get to my car or notice I've got 16 gigs, not 64.
What did you want? What did you intend to purchase and did purchase?
I purchased an iPad Air 2 with 64 gigs.
Okay.
Mostly the reasons being that the difference between that and the Pro, I'm going to do a bad job of enumerating them right now, but the big selling points of the iPad Pro are that screen that has this amazing color solution to it, has a better camera, and it'll use the Apple Pencil. And it was kind of like every salesman that went through these bullet points with me, I was like, dude, I need GarageBand, and then I'm going to use Google Docs. That's like it.
Yeah.
So they all kind of like went, yeah, just get the 9-inch iPad Air, and you'll be fine. So I walk out with that, and I expected that apps on it, or programs as I'm used to calling them, would be different, in user interface and operation and all that kind of stuff. I begin my first test with iMovie, which is definitely different, definitely limited on the iPad, but I chop up some video with it, add a couple of little effects, add some titles, and I decide, like, you know what, I can live with this. This does what I need it to do. It doesn't do a whole lot more than that, but that's okay. I was kind of bummed that it only outputs 720 HD at the top. It will not output a 1080. At least, you know what? Maybe I had a flawed experiment, because I was going from a video shot by a guy on an iPad that would only go 720.
Sure. Yeah,
so anyway, it didn't look to me like there was any option above that. I could be wrong on that. I admit. So later in the evening, I decide, okay, well, now I'm going to pull down our latest episode of Todd and Taylor Show, and I'm going to edit it. So I go to my my cloud solution where I have the raw files of this, which Apple.
And what is your cloud solution, by the way, for the folks at home who are thinking they may want to get into the same business?
We have a couple, but this happened to be on Dropbox.
Dropbox, okay.
Which is, I guess, important to know, because I put the Dropbox app on the iPad, I open it up, and I go to the correct folder, and I see the GarageBand file that you and I had created, which is, whatever episode .band. That is the extension that GarageBand gives to projects, .band. Okay. Now, I know from previous experience that a .band extension is not actually a single file. That's a weird way that Apple puts an extension on something, but it's a quote, like a project. And so it's actually a folder. Now, if you're looking at it on like Mac OS or even iOS, you're just going to see .band. But there's a way to get into that as a folder and see all the individual files. I didn't care about that. I just thought, well, I'm just going to download the .band, drop it in GarageBand. So that's when I start hitting these problems with the iOS. So you can't just I couldn't just download it, because there's no file management on the iPad to go find it in a folder and then tell it to open with GarageBand. I have to go through some convoluted process to get it to open with, to make it available offline, wait for it to download within the Dropbox app so that it is available offline, and then do an open with, and then choose GarageBand to open with. And
this is all because, and by the way, this is all because iOS does not have a native desktop of any kind. You can't just take a file and put it on your desktop and open it with another program. You got to get it from one app to another app, and sometimes there's a third app that's like the intermediary that simply exists to let you get it from one app to another app. It's right. It's kind of absurd.
Yeah, and it demonstrates how easy it is to hit the limits of Apple's closed system. And so I get the file. It won't open in GarageBand, and it tells me that the file is either corrupt or something else about it. And so I try another file. I go, okay, well, maybe that was because it was this huge podcast and it's hundreds of megabytes large or whatever. And so I find a tiny song that I've recorded. Like, I had recorded this instrumental, like 30-second, an interstitial music for something, and so I download that. It's very tiny. I do the whole offline process, blah blah blah. I open it up in GarageBand, doesn't work. Tells me it's corrupt, and so I'm like, huh. So now, my antenna are up, and I start looking for a solution to this, and it turns out, and I don't even know, like the way I put it to my friend Boris, the iPad expert and the Apple expert, was that this is some real Microsoft level shit that Apple has pulled. Check this out. Despite the fact that a program called GarageBand exists on macOS and exists on iOS, this is not the same program, and the files are not compatible with each other.
That blows my mind.
And to get even more ridiculous, as far as I understand, the iOS GarageBand will make a file .band. So when I start looking up solutions to this, I find tons of solutions from people recording on the iPad and then going through a little export weird solution to get it to open on Mac OS X. And I'm thinking, well, that's crazy. I would rather have the greater processing power of the at least desktop, laptop, Mac OS X on the recording side. It's the editing side that's important to me, and that seems like it should just translate to iPad.
And Apple will look at that and go, oh, no. We built this so that our community of developers and app makers can provide a great ecosystem for you. We just get out of the way.
Well, it's such a convoluted process, but it's a closed system within a closed system. And then
then which level are we on?
So
get to limbo.
Right, because
can't solve anything.
Because I definitely felt incepted that weekend. Because GarageBand files are .band, like the project. So I can't just have a garage. I can't go to our Todd and Taylor folder, go to episode number 6, and just tell Audacity to open it, because Audacity doesn't know what a .band file is. Wow. So, but I can go through a weird little process on a Mac to turn that .band into a readable folder. Like there's kind of a little workaround thing you can do, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a normal folder tree, and there are all your AIF files for each track that you've recorded, and you just drag those into Audacity, and you can mix them as you want. But so on the iPad though, I have no way to do that, because there's no workaround. There's just there's Dropbox app and GarageBand app, and I can't open up the .band at all in Dropbox. And every workaround that and my friend Boris looked up ended with, well, you're going to have to do this part on a computer. and then you move it to the iPad. And I was like, well, if I have to do any of it on the computer, I don't need the iPad. Because if I'm getting on a plane in 3 days and I want to edit on the plane on this 4-hour trip or whatever, why would I bring I can't imagine bring a laptop, open up the file, put it on a USB stick or something, plug it into the dongle on the iPad. This is the dumbest workflow ever, oh my God, I just use that laptop. So this is just a very long, frustrating rant about how that won't open. And then to prove how stupid it is, I, on my Android device, go to my Dropbox app, see the .band file there, and just tap on it, and it just opens like a folder. And it shows me everything in it, all the AIFs. On my Android, I can just download those AIFs individually, So there are problems with Android DAWs, with the DAWs, like digital audio workstations. There's a latency kind of issue with Android where the devices don't run as fast as the app is going to run, or vice versa. But I did find one app whose name I should have recorded, and I didn't find it. But basically, I kind of proved to myself, well, if I'm going to go through all this trouble, I might as well just stick with Android. My default is always just go to the most open source, option available. And Boris gave me several different options on workflow with the iPad, but it all came down to you can't use the files you've already recorded, which is totally stupid. I mean, now I can sit down on my Mac and turn all those .band projects into readable folders, then put them on Dropbox, then download them, on the iPad, use a different DAW to edit them. But it's like at that point they've already lost. And
every time you say Boris, by the way, I'm thinking Boris Dlugosch, the EDM artist DJ.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. That is not the typical Boris that people associate.
Because I'm like Boris Dlugosch, like, and if anyone would know audio, it would be Boris Dlugosch. So, you know.
I always think of Alan Cummings' character in GoldenEye.
Oh, ooh.
Wasn't his name Boris?
I'm Invincible. That guy.
Yeah.
That was my first exposure to Alan Cumming. Oh my god. He's exposed.
We thought we had such a different impression of that actor. Then it turned out, he would the man he would become.
Yeah, he really in GoldenEye, he was playing against type the entire, like, I never would have known that would be the same guy who was the MC in Cabaret or in any of these other these are the things he's been in. That's so crazy. I need to go back and rewatch that just to see Alan Cumming.
Or Nightcrawler.
Nightcrawler, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I felt the frustration in that weekend that, like, I've only hit that frustration wall with Apple, and that closed. I mean, it was like I wanted to. I would have run out and bought like an Ubuntu tablet immediately if such a thing were in a store nearby. Like, I just wanted to reject Apple entirely. Like, it was so aggravating.
Well, remind me, you've had a Nexus tablet of some kind?
Yeah,
like prior to this whole experience, you've had a something.
I'll just put the period on the Apple sentence, which is, so I bought that on a Friday, hit that wall Friday night with the video, the audio editing. Saturday, barely looked up a couple of solutions, returned it Sunday morning. Like, it was like before lunchtime on Sunday. I was in the Apple store going, nope. So returned that as soon as possible. Also, I should note, when I even just tried to record on the GarageBand, the promised solution for using my MIDI keyboard controller didn't work, and I was like, well, just get out. This is I couldn't even believe it. Like, it was just like one last nail in the coffin. Like, I can't even make I can't even just record an original thing on it because there's going to be some workaround for that. So but yeah, that's my Apple story. I can get into the Android stuff, or we can listen to your grievances on Apple, and then we can get into Android.
When I saw this in the show notes, it just it was one more thing that I've been talking about this for, and I'm not the only one, obviously, but I've been talking for about a year now. I'm like, what is happening at Apple? Like, what has literally happened? And to clarify my stance, I am also technology agnostic. I actually kind of like having something in every camp. So I've got an Android smartphone, I've got an iPad Air 1, I've got a Windows machine. I used to love Final Cut until Apple fucked with it, and now I'm a Premiere guy. But like, I've always been open to, I have an iPod too, so it's like, one of the original iPods and everything. So like, I'm not against them. I'm not a fanboy. I just kind of look at everything they do, on a case by case basis and judge it based on my need at the time, as everyone should. I think people get a little too carried away with their techno faith and sort of tribalism and everything that comes along with it. It's not necessarily a healthy thing, and I think that's one reason Apple has gotten really lazy. They've been living off the fumes of the iPhone for so long now. They just haven't really innovated anything new. Let's go down the list. I mean, it's a long list. I'll cherry pick some of the biggest ones. They didn't develop a streaming service in time. Beats created one. They buy Beats. I thought at first for just the headphone side of things, just the retail part of it, but apparently they wanted that streaming engine, but apparently not, because then they went and spent 4 or 5 months rebuilding it from scratch so that the Apple Music app they launched looks literally nothing like the Beats Music app that was already fine and looked great and had, beautiful functionality. It's like Apple literally made it uglier. Like, when was Apple made something uglier that they acquired? It's like, what? On top of that, iTunes is still a bloated nightmare that they have never fixed. They've never bothered to do the, as much as I deride Facebook for splitting messages off and trying to do the Messenger app and trying to do the the Pages app and the advertising app and all these things. I kind of realized like Apple should have done that with iTunes 7 years ago. They should have taken the apps part of it and just called it Apple Apps. It's its own program on your computer. It just does that. Music is its own thing. Like they could have easily segmented these things out, building towards a future where Apple Music would be its own standalone streaming thing. It's not part of iTunes anymore. Like iTunes doesn't exist. It shouldn't exist anymore. It should be all these different things. So there's that. I'd say more damning than that, though, or any of those things, is the fact that they haven't put out any kind of TV experience. I mean, other than the TV box, which is just basically a packet of apps in a pretty little box. But they also haven't done anything in VR. And VR is going to be, we talked about it on the Portland podcast, VR is going to be huge. It already is. It's big now, but it's going to be massive. It will be one of the 3 mainstream technologies of the next 10 to 15 years. And Apple hasn't done anything. And you could argue, well, yeah, but they weren't the first to, they didn't build the iPod right away. They sat and waited and watched the Rio, was the Diamond Rio, and all the, and Creative Zen and all that stuff come out. And then they made the iPod. And, fair enough, but they are now, and that was back before, no one really expected anything out of Apple back in 2000, 2001. So it was, they could kind of sit in the shadows and plot and kind of come up with a great device. Same thing with the phone. Like, all these phones were out for the longest time and then they're like, iPhone. I think now they.
Well, I mean, we got to give them a lot of credit for the iPhone.
Oh, no, I do. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying like we weren't, we kind of were, but we weren't totally looking at them just yet to go, you guys need to solve this problem. It's kind of like, and here's the iPhone. It's like, oh, everybody kind of looked in awe and just like, wow. But since the iPhone, everybody has looked at Apple as a company that needs to lead on innovation. They need to lead on developing new cool things, be on the forefront of new technologies, give us the market signals as customers, investors, passersby, whatever you think. Give us those signals that, hey, we're on it. We're looking at something. And VR hasn't been on their radar ever. It's not on any earnings calls. It's not in any presentations. Nothing. And I'm like, this, what's Sony's going to have something next year, if not this year. Microsoft's going to have something. Like Samsung's going to continue to make a better one. HTC's got the best one. Oculus is coming soon. All these companies, Amazon, I'm sure has one soon too. Nobody at Apple is even paying attention to VR yet. So it makes me wonder what happened to this company. When Steve Jobs died, everyone, they're all going to go down the shitter now. And I'm like, no, the company's not just one man. This is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Like, it's not just one man. I'm beginning to think it might have been just one man that his personality alone willed it to be this kind of unnatural force of innovation and commerce that I just don't see anybody over there taking that mantle now,
Well, and strangely, since I started the Apple rant, Apple, to me, their legacy has always been a perfectly usable product, but I do think that has hindered them in not only just looking ahead, but just looking at the present landscape. And it's when you were listing your grievances, I remembered this description I had read. This has got to be like, I was like a kid, if not, or maybe possibly just a very young adult when I read this about different design philosophies and product philosophies between like Sony in America and Sony Japan. And they were, I just remember this weird example was, in America, we get a new Walkman like every year. Like, here's the new Walkman for this year. Buy this Walkman or Discman or whatever. But in Japan at the time, they were iterating so quickly. So it was like, here's the Walkman, 456. Here's the Walkman 457. So every couple of months they were putting out the product that just had small tweaks. And to me, that is Google's approach, and it frustrates so many. It's what I would call just like normal users, because an app may appear. You and I mentioned it in just an offline conversation the other night about Google Wave.
Wave, of course.
Something like that may appear and then disappear, or change or something. And it's, it is frustrating. But what I see in Google, which I don't see in Apple, is more of that, like maybe it's an experimental philosophy or something to like keep moving, because they know that whatever the physical product that is made this year, it doesn't really matter. Like the operating system and the platform and all that is what's going to be on everybody's mind next year. And I trust that Apple's got a great roadmap and like superior designers. That nothing has felt so good in my hands as that iPad did. I mean, that was just beautiful. But
I mean, I love mine too. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But you look at that user experience, and like there was something that had happened. Like when that iPhone came out, it took what was a jumbled. I mean, like remember the last phone you owned before you got an iPhone, or before you got a Samsung equivalent, or before you just touched
my Razor.
Yeah, the Razor, and I think I had that LG. It was like this LG thing that was like a flip phone, but you opened it up and it had like a keyboard on the inside. It was, at the time it was kind of cool, but like just the operating system for that thing was just a nightmare. Like you couldn't even like loading on music from your own computer onto it. You had to
which
download.
I never even did on my Razor.
Oh, I tried that all the time because I'm like, I wanted one device. I wanted what the iPhone ultimately provided. I'm like, I want one device to rule them all. And like at that time, that was kind of like the closest thing. I want to be able to onboard my music. And Jesus Christ, you had to download like a different program, and then you had to download like a crack for your phone that interface with that program, and then you had to and it was just like this big whole thing.
And people at the time thought I was a crazy person because I had a DAP, a digital audio player, which ran on a single AAA battery and had a USB to like mini USB connection. I plugged it into any computer, Windows or Apple, dragged MP3s into its folder, and it played them. And I was like, what are you kidding me? This is the most brilliant thing I've ever owned. But it looked ugly, and the iPod existed. So people were like, I can't, that's so stupid. And I was like, yeah, but then I got to have an iTunes account. I got to move all my stuff over there. I remember there was some goofy limitation of like, certain file types that wouldn't translate to iTunes, and
at the time it was only only MP4 or AIFF. There was it was some proprietary thing.
I don't think it would even use MP3s. That can't be right.
Originally it didn't. Originally
it was M4As and AIFs. I think.
Wow, that was the original, because that was before the big. Remember the big whole thing was, I think you could onboard your own MP3s, but then they wouldn't sell MP3s in the store. Because of label, the labels are like, well, we need some privacy, private
DRM,
DRM, that's the right thing. And then finally, Steve Jobs is like, well, and Capital, I think, to their credit, or EMI was the first one in 2009, I think, to say we're going to sell MP3s, and that was like I remember at the time everybody's like, oh my God, EMI's dropping DRM, and now what's really funny is you go to Spotify and like everything's DRM. It's just like the whole thing is nobody seems to mind or notice.
Or not DRM'd.
No, Spotify, like all the files are, I don't think any of the files, they're not MP3s. They're just the files that you won't, if you're a Spotify account, if you don't pay up, those files just are worthless.
Their rights are managed in that way, right?
Yeah. So all that to be said, but here's the point I was making earlier. Apple was this company that fixed problems, that took complicated nonsense and went, here's a better, simpler way to do it. And then they kind of went, you could argue they went too far, and that's why things like Final Cut Pro got, basically mutated into some version that no professional wants to use anymore, or that, now they're talking about removing the freaking audio jack on the iPhone, and it's like, you're too far that way. We don't, you're just looking for shit. Although, that's also that removing of the jack is also a symptom of this problem where they just kind of they're sniffing their own hubris. Like they have made so much money off the iPhone. There's not an economic imperative for them to innovate like they used to. There's not a force of personality in Steve Jobs there to push them in new creative directions or literally scream at everybody until he got exactly what he wanted. Like there's not, if you're to read the stories and believe those stories. So it's like those things aren't there. And it's just depressing to see this company, even though I'm not a huge fanboy, it's depressing to just to see them spinning their wheels, basically. And I wonder if it's not going to bite them in the ass in about 5 years when we're hitting that period now where phone companies aren't subsidizing phones anymore. You have to buy it basically wholesale. And let's be honest, the iPhone 6 in the iPhone 7, there's not going to be a lot of difference other than the audio jack's missing. Like, how much faster can it be? How much cooler can it be? It's like it's the same form factor. So like, what else are they going to do? So it's like, I feel like that's going to kind of cripple or delay some of those sales on the iPhone. And what is left to pick up the slack? I don't know.
Well, and there's still such an incredible, I get it that it's such an incredible value to the fact that I bought an iPad Air new. Mm-hmm. That was the model that had been released almost 2 years ago. And there is no lack of confidence from the Apple Store employees, or even from me, that would run just as capably as anything I bought this year. It was like, hey, if you want, like, you can go into an Apple Store. I think they still sell the iPhone 5, but you could buy the 5 or the 6, which is now a year old. The new iPhone is actually that SE. That's the dimensions of the 5S, I guess. But it's like you can buy, like, they've got such a solid device that it's going to run the operating system. My mom just bought a new iPhone, and I was telling her, like, look, any of these are going to update. It's not like it is not the Android problem, which we'll get into in a second. But I love those design aspects, but they are contributing to the problem that they initially got such success by solving, which is they've, the Windows problem used to be that these users were sort of stuck using it, even though it didn't do the things they wanted it to do. And Apple, when they were reinvigorated with Jobs coming back to them, when they hired him back on, and he had that big revolution in the iBooks and iMacs and all that, like that gave people a usable device where they were no longer sort of trapped in the system that they didn't like. And now Apple's built that system that they're trapped into, because if you've been an iPhone, iPad, iOS user for the past 6 years or something, you are really going to hate switching to something else. But I bet it's easier. Well, maybe not in my case, because I just tried to do it, which was jump into the ecosystem. I don't know. I just think it's like I said, it was a closed loop within a closed loop. Like they've made a program that isn't even compatible with another program they made with the same name. Like that is so philosophically perfect of the problem with Apple that I was like, I can't even be a part of this inception that's happening on my device, So
Well, let's talk about compatibility with other OSs, because let's be honest, the newest version of Android, by all intents and purposes, is basically iOS with some extra features. It's the same app grid. It's the same. You can double press your home button on your Galaxy S5 or whatever it is and clear your apps. The only difference is that you get to have fully functioning widgets on your phone, which I actually like a lot. And there's some other sort of, there's some other apps that run, like there's some cache clearing apps and things that kind of do a better job of getting rid of the cruft on your device than iOS. I know iOS, just some of those apps build up their documents in cache, and there's no way to get rid of it without deleting the app and reinstalling the app. So this, on the Android, you can download a bunch of apps that just clear the cache but keep the app. Or keep your spot in line if you were playing a game or something. So I appreciate that. But like when you're thinking about, if you're somebody who's like, I've been using iOS for 5 years, I don't know if I can switch. I think you could. If you picked up the newest Samsung phone, I think you could very easily switch. Unless you're one of those people that like gave your soul to Apple contacts and all these proprietary things that aren't available and then you have to start from scratch, and then God be with you. But like I don't think there's the hurdle for I think there's a hurdle to going from OS to Windows 10. But I think on the mobile side of things, it's pretty comparable.
Well, I would take exception to any description of Android as like almost iOS-like,
Okay.
But I would be really hard pressed to delineate why I think that. That's just me as an Android fanboy saying, no, of course it's not like my hated arch rival iOS.
You're going from that perspective. I thought you were going to say, well, no, iOS is clearly superior in every way. Like I didn't realize you were going to go the other way.
Definitely think Android is superior mobile wise, and what what I think is so interesting, and this has happened several times to me over the past few weeks, is that an Apple user will tell me something like, "Oh yeah, but I mean on Apple when you buy a new device, you just log in and it all your contacts and apps are there." And I'm like, "Yeah, the same thing happens on Android."
Yeah.
And in fact, Androids were updating their OS over the air before iPhones ever were.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a great point.
This there are Apple users who are kind of trapped in this, and not the smart people. You know who you are, our listeners. You're the smart ones. Obviously, there. But I'm just saying there's a whole swath of users who think that the experience on an Android is somehow like dumber and not as competitive. So that they'll just kind of speak to you like that. Like, well, I mean, on an Apple, you can work offline or whatever, and you're like, yeah, I know. Jesus Christ.
You can work offline.
I mean, what do you think Androids are? Like, this
Apple
is not.
Apple devices never get viruses either, so that's what I've been told. It's like,
yeah. So
they never get hacked either. I put all my naked pictures on iCloud, and I've never been hacked. And Jennifer Lawrence was just unlucky. So
the biggest problem for Android, so if Apple has created their own problem, like if Apple has become the problem they were invented to solve, Android is becoming the problem that we all already knew about from Windows, which is when you allow all these people, any manufacturer, to use your operating system, they're just making shitware non-stop and calling them Android devices.
Yep.
And I have heard, although granted, I haven't tried to do the research on this, but I've never run across it. I read a shit ton of stuff about mobile operating systems and Android, and specifically. I have never heard Google say, "Oh yeah, we want OEMs to make their own changes to Android." I've never heard Google say they want people to customize.
I thought Google in the last year was actually moving in the opposite direction.
That's what I've heard several times, which is we've got to lock this down because you keep screwing it up.
That, and they were doing it kind of in a phase, because of contracts and stuff. They were doing it in a phased sort of position. But like once HTC's Android licensee contract ended, they would have to play ball with the actual version of Android. Like, it can't be like, half marshmallow, half whatever we want it to you look at an HTC phone and you look at a Samsung phone, and
totally different.
It'd be Android, but like the way the apps execute, the way the dialer looks, like everything would be different. And you're like,
now what do you use?
I currently have a Samsung S5. I'm actually due for a renewal, but it works so well, I really don't see the need to buy a phone right now. Like, it's rock solid.
Samsung's one of those. I would not have the problem I have if the manufacturer who altered Android renamed it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
like Amazon does. Amazon basically took Android.
Well, like Android does. I mean, Google didn't call it like, "Hey, it's Linux Mobile." I mean, they named it Android. They named
Linux Mobile.
The computer I'm using to talk to you. They call it is a Chrome OS. They didn't call it like Ubuntu Lite or whatever. This is they forked it and renamed it. Now, if Samsung made the Samsung OS based on Android, I would have no problems with it. I'd be like, good on you, Samsung. There's a device manufacturer called OnePlus, I think that's the one, they make an OS called Oxygen OS. And what frustrates the shit out of me about that is that they get reviewed as if it is based on Android, but they get reviewed by all the like Android Authority and Fandroid and stuff like that, and they all call it an Android phone. I'm like, it's not a goddamn Android phone.
Wow. I mean, the only true Android phone is the Nexus.
So that is it is, and I can definitely talk about Nexus all day, but I'll say that the major problem here is that, granted, Android is not totally open source. I get it. Mm-hmm. I'd only nerd hate mail on like why it's not actually open source and I can't root it and all that kind of stuff. Blah blah blah.
And iOS isn't either. So let's not, let's just keep.
But the spirit of Android in that any mobile manufacturer can use it to power their device is open. Now, those manufacturers, this is where my problem is, they are not open in return. If you buy a Samsung phone, if you spend $850 on the new Samsung, whatever the hell it is, the Note or whatever, the S7 or something, you can't uninstall the Facebook app.
Oh,
you
really?
can only disable it.
You can. You can if you root your phone.
Well, I mean, but come on. Like, so Samsung has
a common person.
Samsung has made changes to the operating system where they have said we've struck a deal with Facebook to include their apps on our phone. So we will disable the feature that lets you totally uninstall it. So that is what frustrates me. If you're going in the spirit of open source, if you're going to take some operating system someone else built, then you need to. The thing you build with that needs to be open source as well, and you need to allow your users to remove features and apps that they don't want. In fact, I think any Android phone should be able to say, totally uninstall this Samsung UI, and just wipe it to blank, plain vanilla Android. Another term that's driving me crazy, because I've now noticed that manufacturers are often using vanilla Android to mean artificially vanilla Android. Like they're like, it's got some flavors in it. You can't uninstall this shitty app that we put on it, but it's vanilla Android.
One of my biggest pet peeves was when I got it was the Motorola. It was like 5-6 years ago. It was one of the Motorola phone. Yeah, it was the Droid X, I think. And it had the Blockbuster app like hardwired in to where I couldn't even. I tried rooting my phone, and that wouldn't even get rid of it. Like I rooted my Droid X, and I could get rid of all the other crap except for that goddamn Blockbuster app. So it just sat there unused the entire time, pissing me off. And like this, that was what I mean. Blockbuster was in its last year of solvency. So like
their last marketing money went to and it didn't it on all these Motorola users.
So a year later, the company didn't even exist, and their bastard app was still sitting on my phone. I'm like, but let's be honest, like if you really want to get rid of that stuff at least on Samsung, I can't speak for HTC or any of those kinds of things. You can root your phone and basically, you can take extreme measures to get rid of some of that stuff, but that's not it. You shouldn't have to. I get that part.
Exactly.
It's kind of silly that you should have to, go, YouTube, root my phone and all that stuff just to get rid of an app.
And I'm pretty sure that any Samsung over the past 2 years plus, it is basically impossible
to root
to root it and put on like pure Android.
Damn.
I looked into several of those rooting with different ways that you can root something, and several times and I've never owned a Samsung device, but I did see several warnings that were like, this isn't going to work on these Samsung devices, and basically they've just been doing such a good job on security that they don't allow it anymore. So I struggled to find a metaphor like to say open source is an open door, it's an unlocked door or something. And I was like, no, open source is just open. And that's what just drives me so crazy, is that these device manufacturers are not clever enough to build their own operating system that's going to work as well as Android. So they just take it, pollute it, call it Android, and don't allow their users to strip it down to pure Android, that to me is just so frustrating. And I wish more people knew about it. And that's why I think Android sucks, is that Google, I totally get their philosophy on this, but they just do not speak out or even impress upon people what a pure Android experience can be. And in my mind, I went when my
they're gonna have to. I mean, they've kind of started though, right? Like the last year, like go Google and Google, comma. Or talks unified Android or consistent Android. And you're going to see a bunch of stories where they're like, oh shit, because it does affect them at the end of the day. If you as a phone user have a shitty experience on an Android device, that is the fault of the manufacturer.
That is exactly what I wanted to say. Perfect.
That's their fault. At the end of the day, because that you don't know any differently. You don't know that Samsung made some deal with Google and then, tweaked it to their liking. All you know is Google makes Android. This is Google's fault. This is what all Androids are like, right? Like it's not, because you think, you hear the common user just hears iOS and Android. They don't hear they don't hear, oh, Android this, and then there's this version on this phone, but this version on this. So I think, and what's really funny, you compare the Android situation to Microsoft earlier. And I think it's hilarious because Microsoft has learned this lesson finally. It took them 20 years, but they finally learned this lesson. The whole point of the Windows 10 free upgrade for everybody thing was to get everybody on the same goddamn version of Windows and off things like Windows XP, which many ATM machines are probably still running as we speak, which is frightening.
Yeah.
There's all these, like, Microsoft got into this terrible position where all the manufacturers, all the IT professionals basically had a version of Windows that they just stayed with, and so Windows could not advance like OS could. Whenever Apple puts out OS, OS 15, Leopard or whatever, whatever it is. So finally, Microsoft's like, okay, we're gonna do this big event where everybody we can get to upgrade is gonna upgrade, and then from that point on, we're locking you into one version of Windows. And from what I understand, and correct me if you've heard otherwise, I don't think they're going to be doing Windows 11 or 12. I think it's just going to be Windows from now on, and it's just going to be updates are going to come out, and they force you to accept the updates whether you want it or not. Which, you can argue that's good or bad, but I think it at least keeps everything consistent. And then they made the other wonderful decision to say, okay, fine, Office can be available on every device, in every format you want. They kind of play the Adobe thing, like we're all about subscriptions now. Like Microsoft in the last 3 years has really turned around as a brand. Like they've really sort of, I'm not saying they're perfect and they don't have a long way to go, but it seems like they finally are starting to get it. Like once Ballmer left, it's like, oh, okay, this is how you run a company in 2013, 14, 15, 16. Like this is how it happens. So, it's funny. I wonder how long it's going to take for Android/Google to figure that out too.
Well, and see, I think that's because Google's bread and butter is not on their operating systems. Their operating systems and their devices and stuff are really just a means to an end of search and ad revenue.
Yeah.
So in one sense, like you get it, like it's like, hey, maybe they don't care if OEMs put shit into Android, because every device sold on Android still helps their bottom line.
Yeah.
But what you said in there, which is, I hate that someone would buy an Android device. For example, this is a really stupid thing. There's an app called Swype, SWYPE, and it introduced, as far as I know, was at least a very early example of a keyboard that you can just run your finger across, like you're just sort of spelling words with one finger, connecting letter to letter, not typing with thumbs, but holding one finger down, and it would kind of guess at what word you were spelling, and it would moved a lot faster. Well, because open source is a conversation in that sense, Google incorporated this feature into a release of Android, and Google's or Android's built-in like swiping keyboard is now far superior to the app Swype. Wow. But several OEMs, like original equipment manufacturers, will take Android. They have a deal with Swype where Swype pays them a little bit of money to put Swype on every device. So then they'll lock that on there. So you have two choices: the Google keyboard that you type with your thumbs, or the shitty Swype experience that you're now locked into. And you cannot uninstall Swype and get back to the default Google experience. So people like, your older relatives who have an Android device are like, I hate this stupid Swype keyboard and I hate typing with my thumbs. And they're just like, this is a random example, but they might go, man, Android sucks. Their keyboard is terrible. Yeah. But the thing is, the actual Android keyboard is amazing. It's just that it gets fucked up like that. And it's the same with like music experiences and, email experiences. And it used to be browsing experiences, because it used to be the OEMs wouldn't even put Chrome on there, which is probably one of the reasons that Google realized, like, we've got to make Chrome, because we've got to stop people from putting shitty browsers to use our experiences with, I like what you said
just now, though. Open source is a conversation.
Yeah.
Like, that's a cool. It's so obvious, but I've never heard that articulated that way before. I really, really like that.
Well, it's like I was listing my grievances with the fake, whatever we're going to call the non-pure Android, and a friend said something like, oh, well, that thing that you like in Android, that came from Samsung, and this other thing you like came from whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's the least they could do. He was trying to say it like Google ripped off the swipe feature or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, Swipe used Google's open source operating system to build their app on. I don't really. I get that there's profits involved and stuff, and it gets icky, but I think Android sees how people are using it, and they roll out a release with that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happens is that you might buy a device, right now that's still Android KitKat or something like 4.4 or whatever, and it will never update because the OEM has basically locked it down, and because of the modifications they've done to Android, they can't update it. So not only are you losing out on like functionality and stuff, your device is getting less secure.
And I think that's the big reason why Google is basically putting a kibosh on that. Like if you're going to license Android moving forward, that can't happen ever again.
Right.
It's becoming huge.
To me, that is the Microsoft problem that you described, which is these people tweak their system. You mentioned Windows XP, which is true because my dad, I think, only stopped using that last year, and he can do nothing but bitch about like Windows 8 that he's on. And I'm like, oh my God, Dad, you're already 2 versions behind now. Like Jesus Christ. And he'll always ask me like, well, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, always update to the latest operating system, no matter what.
Yeah.
But that Windows mentality of, no, I like this one. Like that just doesn't work on mobile devices.
No.
The way we communicate, like SMS apps are going to work differently. Like you've got different emojis, and email's going to work differently. I mean, it's like.
Well, let's just be honest. Everybody, the ability for hackers to target the phones today is much more appealing than it ever was on a desktop computer because there's way more phones than there ever was desktop computers, and more people put all their shit on their phones than their desktop computers. Like, well,
it is our computer now. This is
but it's even more. It goes one step further. It is like a personal assistant that doesn't talk to you yet. Well, and don't tell me that Siri somehow is magically
no, but you raise a great question, which is I doubt that non-pure Android users know how good OK Google is.
Oh, man.
Which of course, OK Google just started listening to me.
I'm going to suggest, I'm glad you said this because I'm going to suggest everybody out there who's a diehard Apple fan or has an iPhone or has ever cursed Siri, go find a friend with an Android phone or go into a Verizon store and pick up an Android phone and just simply press the button and do the OK
press the button thing. You just talk to it, man.
Well, I know I've got mine set, so I have to actually press the button though
Oh, gotcha.
But like interact with Google Voice and just talk into it and talk like you normally would. You're gonna find pretty quick you don't have to enunciate anything. Like you can sit there and talk to Siri like you are somebody from a Jane Austen novel, and she still won't understand what you're saying. You can mumble into Google.
Oh my God.
Google Voice, and it's like, and not only does it understand you, it has the exact answer like ready to go before you're even done talking. It's like Jesus. I mean, that is amazing.
I think I told you this offline one time. One of the funniest experiences I had with that, the funniest experience was I demonstrated to some friends of my parents, so some older folks. They had some simple question like they didn't know who had made it to the Final Four, and so I just asked Google. And Google speaks to me and gives me the correct answer, and the guy was like, "Oh, can I do that on my phone?" And he presses it, and he kept asking Siri, and Siri kept giving him the most hilariously incorrect answers. And have you ever seen there was this parody video that I laughed at so much where this Scottish guy asks Siri like where he can get a sandwich? It's on YouTube. No. I'll put it in the show notes. It is so funny because in his thick Scottish accent, he's like, "I just went a wee jammy with the sandwich."
Oh, Siri, I have seen that.
Siri keeps giving him like the wrong answer. That was what was going on with like a very plain-voiced American man in my parents' house. Like he is totally clearly asking Siri what he wants and getting worse and worse answers. Like he's getting farther and farther away from sports. He's just going Final Four. Like
it's like a copy of a copy machine. If you make a copy in a copy machine, it just keeps degrading. Meanwhile, my funniest Google Voice scenario. I was admittedly, I had an edible a couple of months ago, and was enjoying a nice
Already
evening.
like how this starts.
Yeah, I was enjoying a nice evening in, and it started kicking in, and I'm like, I'm gonna watch me some American Horror Story, and just catch up on a season of that. And I'm one of those people who, even when I'm not imbibing like any sort of stimulant, I will constantly watch a show or TV and be like, who is that? What were they in?
Right.
What else were they in?
Oh,
This particular night, though, I was like everything that appeared on screen, and I was too relaxed or out of it to even care. So I literally lazily reached for my phone. I didn't even have it close to my face, and no kidding, I literally go, Google, who's the blonde chick in American Horror Story? Like, I literally say that. I just kind of half mumbled it, and it goes beep, beep, it goes Madison Montgomery it was played by Madison Roberts, and I'm like, or no, sorry, it was played by Emma Roberts, and I'm like, yeah, her. What else is she in? And I literally, that's all I said. I was just like, what else is she in? And like, it literally finds like the other show that she's known for. I'm like, that's great. Who else is in that show with her? There's like a tall guy with like glasses or something. And like literally, it's like just dropping every answer like with perfect clarity.
Yeah.
Like, this is the greatest thing ever. Oh my God.
Siri is a call and response toy, and OK Google is an artificial intelligence.
Yeah. The only difference is Google it doesn't talk back to you yet. I'm waiting for the day that Google.
It does.
Does it?
Mine does.
You're right. No, it does. It does, but not on everything. That's just on stuff that it sort of has a Wikipedia entry for, or like something kind of stored in its initial things. But like if you get really intricate with Google, like it'll give you the answer, but it won't say it to you.
Right.
But that night that I was like doing you're right. It was literally talking back to me. It was like,
yeah, because you're right. If it finds like the Wikipedia answer that is the most agreed upon answer, it will just straight read that back to you, and it's like conversing with an artificial intelligence. If you say to it, send a text, like you could say something like, I could say, send a text to Taylor, I'm going to be 10 minutes late, and it will take that as one command. But if I say send a text, it will say, who do you want to send that text to?
Yeah.
Taylor, which number do you want to use? Mobile. What do you want the text to say? And then it'll read it back to you and say, is this correct? Do you want to send this? Which is just, amazing. And
whereas you say that to Siri and you're like, send a text. It goes, text sent to. And it like literally.
Yeah. What?
to somebody you don't even know anymore. It'll send a text. It'll be like, meet me at car wash at Christmas. Like, what?
Yeah.
What?
So, I mean, to round all this up, when I left Apple, the iPhone ecosystem, which I'd never even embraced. Like I bought my first iPhone used because someone was upgrading to the 2, and I wasn't due for an upgrade yet. And so I got it within the year of the first iPhone, but it's still a late adopter to it. And I'd never used iTunes. I hated iTunes, and I hated that because I had a Mac at work and I had a Windows and Ubuntu at home. So there was some goofy limitation, like how many times I could sign into iTunes. Like you could only have it on 2 different computers. So if I was using a third computer, I couldn't even sign into iTunes or some nonsense like that. And I never keep the phone updated. It was such a pain in my ass. Then I tried to upgrade, and AT&T had the dumbest upgrade options ever. No 2 people could give me the same deal on upgrading to the iPhone 2. And that was the same time that Google created the first Nexus. They had created a previous Android device, and probably several, at least one called the G1, I think. And then the Nexus 1 was available in 2010, and I ordered it. And it was a fantastic phone. It was totally unlocked. So I had run out my contract at AT&T. I walked over to T-Mobile. I didn't have to sign a contract because I had an unlocked device, so I wasn't buying the phone. So I've been unlocked for almost 7 years, and used that Nexus until it just burned it. So the Nexus is the line where Google doesn't actually manufacture the phone, but they spec it out, and they say this is our pure operating system, and these are the specs we want this phone to have, and then they find a manufacturer to make it. And so I had the Nexus 1. It died unexpectedly, and I was like out of town, so I had to go into a T-Mobile shop and say, I need a new phone. I want the purest thing you got. And they gave me this brand new HTC One, the very first one that ever come out. which was loaded with T-Mobile apps that I couldn't uninstall, and this total garbage UI.
Yep.
And at the time, Android was primitive, so the UI of that HTC looked kind of fancy. I mean, it looked better, and I thought, well, it looks better, but I could tell already like it doesn't operate as purely as it's supposed to. And I have something on here called browser, not Chrome.
HTC phones are really good at that. I mean, the Vive is a whole different thing, but the phones are always every time I go to get a new phone, I always sidle up to that HTC, whatever the newest device is, and I get really close, and I'm like, no. It's just like the hardware is perfect. Then they fuck with the OS just enough to where you're like, no.
So the T-Mobile apps on that, which were like this My Account app and stuff, there was some goofy problem I had with those, and I couldn't uninstall them. Of course, I couldn't uninstall Facebook. I couldn't install all this other garbage, and couldn't even disable them. So they kept popping up and like demanding updates and stuff. And when the phone eventually died, I just blamed those apps. I was like, that's ridiculous. Those things were running in the background all the time. I couldn't kill it. Like filled up all my space. I couldn't update the phone properly. And I swore I'm never not having a Nexus. And I got the Nexus 5 that year, and this year made the leap to Project Fi. So I've just done this. So I have a Nexus 5X, which has already updated to Nougat Android 7.0.
Remind me and the kids at home, what is Project Fi?
So Project Fi, actually the kids at home might not even know about it, is Google's cellular service.
Oh, that's right.
What they are doing is buying bandwidth from Sprint and T-Mobile and possibly Verizon.
And this is not the same thing as Google Fiber. It's separate.
Fiber, right. So Project Fi, which you can find at google.com/FI, is it was in last year was invite only, and I had an invite, and I just couldn't pull the trigger on it. And then what they're doing this year is you can get the Nexus 5X for $200 on Project Fi. So I just did that. So what it does is it just figures out what tower you're closest to that they rent bandwidth from, and puts you on that network. So sometimes I'm on Sprint, sometimes I'm on T-Mobile. I don't know. It really encourages you to use Wi-Fi because the billing is in advance. It's $20 for the phone service, and then $10 per gig of data that you use.
That's pretty good, though. I mean, Jesus, like if you use
it's totally flexible.
Yeah.
3 gigs is $50. I think I probably on like at an average to heavy month was probably 4 gigs for me.
That's still 60. That's still about what I'm paying now for like 2 gigs and some change on Verizon.
Yeah. Now, my biggest problem is that I have a fantastic deal on T-Mobile because I'm grandfathered in. I'm like totally unlimited, all that kind of stuff. So, Project Fi works with your Google Voice number. I believe you can transfer a carrier number to it, but I didn't do that because I had a Google Voice number. So I just went ahead and made that my Project Fi. So at this current moment, I'm dealing with carrying 2 phones from time to time, or at least making sure I'm always checking, the other voicemail and stuff. But it's so much stuff is integrated like just perfectly. Like Hangouts on Android had at one point become this sort of catch-all chat plus SMS app, and then they had to break it out, which I think was probably related to Project Fi, but I've never confirmed that. So on Project Fi, it's all integrated again. I can carry one phone, and chats that I've been having with somebody through the Project Fi phone still show up in Hangouts because it's just pushing all SMS through Hangouts now. That's one of those things the average Android user just cannot ever duplicate, I think, at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's already upgraded to Nougat, so I'm on the latest and greatest operating system.
Nougat, I love it.
Yeah, 7.0.
Crunchy nougat is the middle.
And I have nothing. There's nothing significant I could tell you that that's a bummer about it yet. Like the phone is awesome.
It looks cool. I mean, the
service is pretty good.
Powerhouse of a phone.
And I can say so. My dad got a Motorola Moto G4, which is a really, really close to pure version of Android. So I didn't play around with it enough to see what apps he cannot uninstall, but I played around with it enough to show him that the Google apps that he uses work exactly the same as they work on a Nexus device.
Okay.
So that's sort of that would have been my second tier, because those are just $200.
Yeah.
So, and you can get like the, I don't know, like 32 gigs or something on that for 225 or something. And and then
this looks pretty. If I didn't have to go to South Dakota regularly, where basically Verizon owns the state,
right,
I would totally jump on this, because this, I mean, God, this looks so compelling. I can't wait for this to be bigger, like to be rolled out more. I don't know if it could be, though, because they would basically have to do deals with Verizon, and Verizon doesn't want these guys. I think Verizon's worst nightmare is Google controlling the entire supply chain, start to finish.
And see, that's the thing is, so I could be totally naive here. Another knowledgeable friend in the industry said, I can't remember exactly what his complaint was with Fi, but he thinks it's kind of a throwaway project. Like, he doesn't think it's real serious. He didn't compare it to Waves, but when you mentioned that to me the other night, I was like, oh shit, did I just switch my phone to the Google Wave?
No. Google Wave. Okay, let's remind ourselves what Google Wave was. It was a Frankenstein of a product that bizarrely would probably work better today.
It would totally work in a mobile universe.
10 years ago, whenever it came back, it was way too ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And it was basically
Hangouts. It was basically threaded conversations that were somewhere between a chat and an email,
Just like Slack, just like Quip, just like a lot of these.
Oh yeah, Slack and Quip. That's what we talked about the other night. Exactly.
Yeah. So but that being said, I think Google, I don't think they knew how to market it. They certainly didn't know how to explain it to just anybody. It was like, it was almost like if you watch Silicon Valley, it reminded me a lot of Pied Piper, in that they had to go and like literally have like little seminars to explain how to use it. And then, while they did that, a lot of people were like, why can't it just be chat, or why can't it just be this? And I think Hangouts arose out of sort of the aftermath of that.
Well, I mean, wrong. I think that is, I think you're right. We can remind ourselves that Gmail remained in beta for almost 10 years or something.
That's true.
And at Google, and maybe this is a good place to wrap this up, which is, I'll skip back 1 second, which was, so my friend who's pretty knowledgeable, when he was kind of dismissive about Project Fi, what I told him was, when Google was making Chrome, I read this really great analysis of it by this web developer who said, Google's not making Chrome necessarily to compete with IE 8 or 9 or whatever was coming out then. He said they're not really afraid that like Microsoft is going to make a bad browser. They're afraid that Microsoft is going to make a bad browser and everyone's going to use it and it's going to impact the web.
Yeah.
Because JavaScript, like, they're not going to make a browser that is up to JavaScript standards. They're still not going to adopt, just HTML standards, et cetera, et cetera. There are tons of problems with Microsoft browsers. So they made Chrome as kind of like, like a like a dike, like they're holding back the floodwaters. Like, it's a levee against, the rising flood of Microsoft shit.
Well, I like that. Well, it's funny too, because Chrome came out around the same time Steve Jobs went on his jihad against Flash, and
it was a little after that, but it was definitely like the era of that. Yeah. Yes.
And then basically, Steve Jobs single-handedly killed Flash. Let's be honest. Like, Flash video was still alive and well as a thing. I'm not even talking about Flash animation or Flash websites, which were sins upon themselves. Yeah. I'm talking about Flash video as a codec was still a thing in 2007 and 8. And now it's like, you can't put a video up that's not H.264. Like, he pushed that. And granted, that was sort of a vendetta against
the reason, and so we should fill in like how that happened was Jobs said he would never put Flash on an iOS device.
Yes, exactly.
And in fact, I guess ramped that up to where it went on no more Apple devices. Is that correct? But it was definitely the iPhone and the iPad. He said we're never going to put Flash on it. There will never be a Flash port to this.
And that's basically, all of a sudden, as soon as you say that, as soon as you put up that dam or that dike, if you will, developers, people, like, everybody goes, well, what's the point if that half the audience isn't going to even see it?
To me, and this is building on that point, to me, and the reason I jumped to Google Project Fi was I just sort of got a glimpse at the mobile industry, and and how they're releasing shit devices on shit networks. And so to me, Google Fi, the Project Fi, is that same thing. It is a levy against, like, Google's not expecting it to grow worldwide and take over everything, even though they didn't expect that with Chrome, and that's what happened. But Project Fi, to me, is an example of what could be. Like, you could have a sensible data and cellular network plan and a screamingly fast, perfectly updated device. And because Google realized none of the carriers we work with are going to do that, and none of the device manufacturers, like, they're in bed together, the carriers and device manufacturers. So the device manufacturers are making this shitware because the carriers demand it. Put our T-Mobile app on there. Put this, we have this deal with this shitty music app, and so put that on there and disable Google Play or whatever. And so, that's how you end up with stuff like Deezer or whatever. And so Google went, we have to stop that and show people what the future can look like. And that's what Project Fi is. And I just had like one of those frightening glimpses into that and went, yep, that made my mind up. I'm doing the $200
Nice.
5X, and I'm putting it on Project Fi. And that's where we are. We can follow up in 6 months and see if I'm still on it.
Yeah, I'd love to. No, that's a no.
Yeah, I'm excited to go to a couple places where I've had bad T-Mobile signal and see if the Project Fi, like, tower hopping, works for me.
I would love. We should definitely do that, because if in 6 months you're still having a great experience, if not a better one, I may make the jump, even though I need I kind of want to support this.
That's a big thing, is that I want to be an advocate for the way technology should work.
yeah. I think, you know what, and this will tie it up. I think that technology agnostic is probably a better way to go, right? It gives you look at the strengths and assess the opportunity for your need at that time. I think everybody who is a dyed-in-the-wool Apple fan or dyed-in-the-wool Apple hater, like, needs to get off that freaking bale of hay and come join the rest of the world and be and support and put their money behind good initiatives. I think it's one thing to ask for policy changes at the national or state level. It's quite another to as a customer say, it may be less convenient, but I love the direction of this. I want to see more of this, and put your money behind that. And here's the best part, in a year, if it just doesn't work, there will be another phone for just for another small part. You can change at any time. You're not going to be stuck with that phone for 10 years like a house mortgage. Like, you can change.
I don't want to. We should definitely. I don't even want to put the whole foot in these waters, but I will dip the toe in this to relate it to what is going on politically in our country, which is, like, if you vote for shit, you're gonna get shit.
You're gonna get
and
shit.
Like, unless enough people object to that and vote for the good thing with their dollars, like, unless enough people go, you know what, I do want pure Android on a pure like network, nothing's ever going to change. Like, you can't keep going to T-Mobile or AT&T. T-Mobile, I think, is pretty decent. I kind of like those guys, but AT&T especially, you can't keep going to them and going, stop doing all this nasty shit you do. Like, they're getting your money. Like, they don't care. They're never going to change until you put your money somewhere else. You got to vote with those dollars. So
exactly.
and at least in my limited experience at this point, it's a better device on as good a network. So that to me is like, I didn't have to compromise anything, I guess is what I'm saying,
Well, this podcast has been sponsored by Google Fi for everybody.
Yeah, please, Google. We would love to take your advertising dollars.
Google Fi in communities everywhere, starting now today. You can. The world is yours. I need like a pithier catchphrase. Google Fi. It's Spinal Tap, where he's like, and so say all of us, tap into America. That's what Google Fi needs. It's like, and so say all of us, fly me a river. No.
Oh my God. This is going to be great. It's just all puns. Fly me to the moon. Hi-fi.
Up and away, yeah. And what's funny is, progressively, as we keep doing it, we're gonna have like a 1930s accent and just be like, and we'll
get the old radio classics music underneath us.
That's a dead art form, my friend. We need to bring that back.
where can people find you on the internets?
They can find me. I'm on Twitter at Taylor Trask. I'm actually updating as we speak right this minute. I'm updating my personal website. So if you're listening to this after August of 2016, you can find me also on taylortrask.com. What about you, sir?
I am at Hey Todd A on Twitter. And my personal website still exists at heytodda.com, but nothing happens there anymore. But we'll soon, hopefully. We have so much exciting stuff to talk about that we can't talk about yet.
And only because it's not ready yet, but it will be soon, and there will be more stuff. You will be so tired of us talking about stuff because all this new stuff is coming, and it's going to be so. I'm actually very excited. It's going to be really fun. It'll be a fun next year, starting in about 2 or 3 weeks. I'm
not going to give anything away, but I think we've had several podcasts in this season where we've tried a couple of different things and broken away from the subject matter on which we have normally spoken, and I think there's just more of that to come in a much more exciting way. Like it's good. So anyway, until then, you can find us at toddandtaylor.com. Another website that is just a flat one page with all of our podcasts on it, but definitely follow us on Twitter, talk to us there, and hear other podcast hosts doing this. If you listen to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Podbay or Podbean or SoundCloud or anything, Google Play also, we're on all those places. Leave us reviews. That would be very cool of you to leave us reviews and rate us. And leave comments on SoundCloud especially. We are actually in and out of SoundCloud all the time during the week, I would strongly encourage you to leave comments.
And they don't have to be good comments. I mean, that'd be nice too. But you could be like, "What's wrong with you guys?" Like whatever you want. Like create. I want to have a little conversation about whatever you're thinking. So,
I think the way they do the comments on there, where you can leave them like at different points in the episode, is a cool way to continue the conversation.
You're like, Taylor sounds like a whiny bitch right here. Say that. That's fine. I'll gladly take that into consideration.
We should just make up our own comments.
You know what? There may be maybe everybody is a little bit too shy. I would. That's an actually really good idea. That, and I'm going to make a T-shirt that says "Open source is a conversation" because that's a goddamn great quote that I think you may have originated. I've been Googling since you said it, and I can't find it. Can't find it anywhere.
Well, I should plug my book, Good Simple Open, which is goodsimpleopen.com, where I rant a lot about how if things were open and simple, they would be good by default. Because when people try to make things that are good and they ignore those two things, I don't think they get there. I think they make complex messes that might, you're trying to justify the means with the end, and it's not always a good way to do it. But anyway.
Well, on those wise words, I think we'll see you guys next week.
And once again, we have not had the conversation before the episode started on how to end the episode. So the episode officially ends right now.